Hey everybody. Well, this has been kind of a hard video for me to make. I've been kind of rolling the thoughts around in my head for a while now about what to say. And I wanted to give myself time to think about, how I wanted to say things. I made a video, the last video that I uploaded on my YouTube channel was about this life directly as to what was going on in his life, what I had learned. If you listen to that video, you hear me talk about this new fiance of his. He had just recently signed divorce papers with his ex-wife, who was, it's all on my YouTube, and I'm not want to go back into all that, like rehash and all that, but they got married not long after our last contact. He moved in with her and they got married very quickly. The marriage lasted about 2 years, but total they were probably only together about a year, because toward the last end of the first year, the things that she would post was, back and forth kind of stuff. And so I hadn't made a video about him directly for a while, and I decided that day that I was going to make a video and talk about this new fiance. Her commenting in other people's posts about stuff about him. And of course, I know you're supposed to not do that and have no contact, but as human beings, our curiosity sometimes replaces our common sense. And so, when I started thinking about this new woman, and I saw the pictures of the two of them, and of course that common sense flew out the window, and I went and checked out her page, and I saw that she had young kids. I would guesstimate the youngest in the pictures to be around 11. The oldest maybe was 14 or 15. And I really started feeling sorry for this woman more than any of myself or anybody else. Because I knew, as I was thinking about the ex-wife, I said to myself, she's in the stage right now where she's starting to figure him out. She's starting to realize that she's been played by this narcissist. She's realizing that it's time for her to put her life back together. She's not going to get any answers any more than she's already gotten. So I was picturing her in my mind being in the same place where I was at when I started to make these videos, this playlist, back in 2019. And so when I made the video about the new woman, I was saying to my listeners and to myself, this woman is going to have it worse than any of us, because she does have younger kids. Feeling really bad for her. And in that video that I made, I talked about, what would happen if someone reached out to her or someone in her family and said to them, you better really backtrack. Here's what's getting ready to happen. Here's the type of person that he really is. Here's what you're going to end up feeling. And you're going to end up isolated from your family and friends. You're going to end up divided from your children. There's going to be fighting, arguing amongst yourself and your children. He is going to play this superhero dad role for a while. He's going to be just loving, attentive. He's going to take them places. He's going to attend their sporting events. He's going to, just be the great dad who steps in and steps up. And then, slowly but surely, over a little while into it, he's going to let the mask start to crack. And he's going to start to feel bored. And he's going to start to talk to other women. He's going to start cheating. He's going to start texting and calling and staying gone longer periods of time. And he's going to start texting these women. And you might get to feeling like there's something crazy going on, But then if she questioned him and started to ask what's going on, this is around the time that he starts to play these mind games. Her family and friends, and even her children, who would probably see through him before she would start to bring things to her attention, and she would still be under that love bomb. So she would kind of believe what he was telling her, because I did, and I know the other woman did, because she talked about some of the things that happened. So I was feeling really bad for this new woman, and I was just thinking, woe is her life that's coming, because myself or any of these other women in his past, or anybody that knew him in his life, could have stepped up and reached out to her and said, I'm just warning you. She would not have believed it. And she would have told us to F off and mind our own business, and that she was head over heels in love with this wonderful, fantastic Superman. Because that's the role that she was still in, and that was where I was at when I met him and got involved. That was where every woman and every person out there who's been involved with a narcissist in a relationship knows what I'm saying. It's true. Nobody can tell you anything. Nobody can convince you that this perfect person who you expect to make this perfect life with is not legit. End up getting destroyed even worse. Hang on just a second. So let's move ahead in this story. This has been a very difficult time for me. I have had not only my own struggles that were going on in my own life already, with situations in my own personal life, my work life, but I found out accidentally, I found out that my ex-narcissist had passed away. He passed away very suddenly. What I understood was that it was just, he had not been sick. I don't know the whole details. I don't know if he had been under the weather, but as far as I know, he had had no health problems as far as anything that he was being treated for. I don't know all the details, because I've had nobody to speak to me on the subject. But he died very quickly, like it was something, I think they said he had had a heart attack, but I'm not definite about that because I don't know. And keep in mind, he was younger than me, so he was a relatively young man. I don't know the circumstances. Maybe one day I will find out. Maybe somebody will come to me and tell me the details. But I had walked into a gas station to pay for some gas, and I was getting I think my mother was with me. She had gone to the back of the store. There was a man in line paying for his whatever he was buying at this gas station. And she said, "Yeah, I heard about that. That was awful." And he said, "Yeah, we're getting ready to have his funeral." I said to this clerk, did you all say that such and such passed away?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, I think I heard that he had had a bad heart attack. 4 minutes. I just blanked out. I remember paying for my gas. I remember walking back out to my car. And from that moment, walking out that door and getting into my car, I don't remember pumping my gas. I was in a state of shock, really. I really was. It was like one of those fugue states. And it wasn't mourning. It wasn't like a grieving, mourning feeling. It was just, I don't even remember it. I know I did pump gas. I know I put my gas cap back on, and I got back inside my car, and I waited for my mother to come out of the store. I remember sitting there looking at my phone, and I remember sending my best friend a message and asking her if she had heard about this, and she said no. And I remember waiting for my mom to come out and get in the car, and I drove away. And I was in a state of shock the whole rest of the afternoon. And of course, got on social media and started searching through everybody's page to find something to see if this was real. I went to the local funeral home page, and there was his obituary. And it was surreal. It was like reading some fictional novel. I couldn't believe it. But I'll tell you all the strangest part of it all. The strangest part of it all was the very first thought that I had when I finally started having a thought was, and I know this is going to sound harsh to some people, and believe me, I'm not happy that this man died. I'm not sad. I haven't cried or anything, but I've just kind of been in a state of like a kind of a confusion. But the very first clear thought that I had was that this new woman, this young woman with these young kids, has been spared. I said, I don't, just like the ex-wife, the one that he was with after we broke up, or after all the hoovering and everything. It had been a while, but you know what I mean. After he moved on to the next supply. I talk about this in my playlist, and I don't know where it's at. It's in my videos somewhere on my YouTube, but I talk about how she had posted on Facebook that God had sent her an angel, that she had just found the perfect man, that God had, it was an answer to a prayer, this man. And I remember very clearly saying, yeah, it's not an angel. It's an angel, but not the kind you think. And I watched that play out over a 1.5 to 2 year period of what she went through. This happy, fantastic, Mr. Wonderful, perfect man, this perfect specimen, this perfect dad figure, how loving and wonderful and kind he was, and what all he did for her and her family, to the roller coaster, to the heartbreak. And I knew I was going to watch it play out again with this new woman, and it was going to be even worse because she had these younger kids, and their lives were going to be thrown into this state of chaos. And I know a lot of you are saying, you're just being a little bit overdramatic. No. He would have left her in ruins, whether it was financially, whether it was emotionally, whether it was physically. I don't know, because he never was physical with me. I've never heard that about him with any of the other women as far as like abusive. But mentally abusive, the kind of abuse that all narcissists leave you with, confusion, just like I've gone through over this whole thing. And but I do remember thinking that she's been spared. Only memory she's going to take away in her future as she moves on through her life, finds somebody new, and has to come to terms with the loss of this man. She's mourning him because she still knows that great guy. They've only been together a few months, and she still knows Mr. Wonderful. She still knows the great guy who calls all night long and asks how you're doing. She still knows the great guy who hugs and kisses her and holds her and comforts her, and she still knows the great guy who plans all these fun things to do. She still knows this great guy who is going to, in her mind, is going to give her this great life and be a great dad figure to her kids. She's never going to know the side of, and I don't know how long they've been together, and I don't know if she's seen any red flags or anything like that. But I know they were engaged, so apparently she was still hanging in there, And they hadn't been together long enough, as far as I know, for her to ever see that side of him, So when she goes forward in life and she talks about him, she will not talk about him in the way that I do. She will not talk about him the way that the ex-wife or the one before me and the one before her or any others in between. She won't talk about about him in that way to people. He will always be this really nice guy that she met and planned to marry, and he died suddenly. And she will always kind of wear the role of almost widow, you know. And eventually she will meet somebody, and her grief will turn to happiness again. She won't be left with all these grieving emotions that we are. And the second thought that I started having was these irrational memories. And I'm sure it's like I told my best friend, I said, I'm sure that at his funeral they were talking about what a great guy he was, what a hard worker he was, you know, what a loving dad he was. And I started having those memories of him from before the abuse started. I started remembering the good guy. I started remembering that fun guy, that happy guy, that guy that made me feel like my future was bright and that we had all these plans that we were going to fulfill. I started remembering him the way I fell in love with him, the man that I fell in love with, not the narcissist. But I knew in the back of my mind that was just, I kept telling myself it's irrational. It's fake memories. It's false memories. But I think maybe it was just my way of my mind and my heart protecting myself. Because like I said, I haven't cried. I haven't mourned. I haven't said, oh my God, I can't believe he's gone. But I have said, and I know this is irrational too for anybody who knows anything about narcissism, I say to myself, I'm never going to ever get closure now. Not that I ever would. But when he was living, there was always this chance. I would pass him on the road, or I would see something about him on the internet, and there was always this possibility that maybe we would speak again someday. I always kind of had in the back of my mind that my journey with him was not complete, that there would be a time when we would run into each other and we would speak. And I never thought that I would ever go up to him and just like lay into him and tell him off and scream and cuss at him or do anything like that. I never had those kinds of feelings. I did, but I never intended to ever do that. But some little irrational, still little abused part of me that was unhealed kept thinking, one day maybe we'll have a conversation. And maybe one day he'll hear me out and he'll hear me say, you know, why did you do those things to me? Why did you treat me the way that you did? Why did you start this life in me and start this life with me and then turn on me and leave me? Things to me, because it was easy for me to accept that than to accept that he had just destroyed me or tried to. At the moment it felt like that he had, but he didn't, you know. I did pick myself up, and I know that people are hearing me talk right now and saying, well, it doesn't really sound like you're over it. With any narcissistic relationship, with any relationship where a breakup happens, sometimes you harbor these unresolved emotions and feelings for that person or because of that person. But with a narcissist, you don't really ever get the chance to hear them say, it was me, it was my fault, I'm sorry for the way I treated you, you know. You'll never get that from the narcissist. But anybody whose narcissist is still living has this little place inside of them where they think, maybe one day and you question your own self. You question, is this real? Is he really this bad? Were things really as bad as I thought they were? And you know that they were, but there's just this little, it's almost like a protective shield around you in some way. And so I did start to think about the good times, and I started remembering some of the things that we did together, such as a day, I can remember it just like it happened yesterday. We went on this little road trip, and we pulled off, and we got some food, and we went to this little park. And we sat at the picnic tables, and we walked around the lake, and we held hands, and we talked about going camping there someday, and it was just a very beautiful, wonderful day. And I always remember that one particular day out of all the other days that we had together, because it was the one day when I just felt real true love for him and from him. And even though it started falling apart not long after that, I choose to remember that one day with that one good man as a memory that, I can take nothing else away from it. But I also remember all the bad days. I remember all the lies. I remember all the blame. I remember the blame pointing the fingers at me. I remember being lied about. I remember being attacked by someone else because of him. I remember being near homelessness, sleeping at a relative's home, but practically living out of my car for a month or two after I left his home. I remember threats being told to me from other people. I remember the darkest hours that I went through. And I remember him just going through life while all that was happening to me as though that he played no role in it. I remember him never saying to any of these other people, hey, you got it wrong. You need to just back off and leave her alone because this is about me. Because the narcissist will never take that responsibility or that blame. They will let everybody, and it boosts their ego when people look at them as the hero and not the bad guy. It boosts their ego, makes them feel important. And then he hoovered me. He hoovered me, and he hoovered me on many occasions for several years. And for several years, I kind of listened to the lies, and I kind of wanted to hear from him. I kind of wanted that connection to see if he would ever say to me, you weren't a bad person. It was all me, And we can all talk about how we've healed and moved on as much as we want, but now he's deceased. He's no longer living on this earth. He's no longer able to say anything to me. And the thoughts and feelings and emotions and answers that I've always hoped to hear, I'll never hear. I only hear what I choose to hear in my head, the scenarios that maybe he would have said to me if we had ever encountered each other again. The child watched and witnessed all the stuff that went on between him and their mother and all these other women that came and went, myself included. And I'm sure that they felt a lot of resentment and hurt and pain, and maybe they have unresolved emotions about all that, or whatever. But I do know that he taught the child quite a bit about working on cars and hunting and fishing and how to be self-sufficient and how to have goals. Because whatever else this man was, and I see a lot of people talk about narcissists being these lazy bums and who just freeload off of other people. He wasn't. He worked very hard. He had a very hard job and a very good paying job, and he was very devoted to his career and his work family. So those are the good points about him. And maybe some people will say, well, and maybe I'm allowing my mind to remember those good points about him. We all talk about narcissists as evil, just these demonic, and I've used these terms as well to describe him. The behavior, I look at pictures of him when he was a young kid. I look at his baby pictures and his pictures of him when he was a little boy. And he was just like any other little boy. He was just a smiling little kid in these school pictures, and surrounded by his family, and he just seemed like this normal, happy little kid, just like any kid. I didn't see the face of the the terror that he became after he got older. I didn't see the face of this cunning, conning, scheming things he did, or the way he treated people. You can't deny it. It's evident. And if it was just me talking about it, it would be like, well, you're just a bitter person. You got thrown over for somebody else and you're bitter. But it's not just me. There's been many people come out and talk about him in this way. My friends and family tried to warn me. Her friends and family tried to warn her. I'm sure this new fiance probably had one or two who had maybe had been around him and kind of picked up on something, or they eventually would have. But I got to talking to somebody on Reddit the other night. We got to talking about this whole aspect of narcissists as evil. And then I looked at the photos of this man when he was a child, and I just saw this smiling little innocent kid, just like any other little kid. And I just always remember there being something like a kind of a really not unfriendly face, but just kind of a stoic, non-smiling, just like he was thinking. So I'm thinking sometime between the smiling little kid in the picture around the age 8 or 9 or 10, sometime between that and probably 16 or so, was when he had this emotional break, or whatever it was that took place. But we got to talking about evil. We got to talking about the demonic evil aspect of how everybody compares narcissists to some type of spirit or evil, just bad vibe or whatever it is inside of them. And this person said to me, do you believe that narcissists can go to heaven when they die? And I said, I've always heard that God protects little children. And I wondered, how does everybody else look at it? If these people have an emotional break at some point in their life when they're young, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age, and something happens, some traumatic event or some event that they can't rationalize with, and they have no identity, they're still that emotionally injured person inside, they're treating people the way they remember the pain or whatever it was that they experienced, or whatever emotional kind of anger or hatred or rage or whatever it was that they felt. And that's the way that they treat other people. And I was talking to this person on Reddit, and they asked me that question, do you think narcissists can go to heaven when they die? Well, it's according to what you believe. In the world that I grew up in the church and stuff that I have followed and been taught, you have to be forgiven for your sins and ask God to forgive you and to be born again to go to heaven, regardless of whether you were a narcissist or not. But the difference is, you or I can go out here and commit sins, and we can be sinful people, and we can call upon God to forgive us, and we can ask for God's forgiveness, and we can get born again, and we can cleanse our past and try to live a more righteous life. But a narcissist, and we can say to ourselves when we mess up, I messed up, I shouldn't have done that, God would not like that. That's not Christian of me, that's not good of me. But a narcissist can't rationalize that. They can't say, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't. That's so bad of me. That's unchristian-like, or that's they can't. They will never admit it. They would bargain with God and say to God, God, what I did wasn't all that bad. Come on, man. You know what I mean? So I don't know the answer to that question, but I got to thinking about it, and I said, I guess when somebody has just died, everybody builds them up, right, on this pedestal. When somebody dies, it doesn't matter what kind of person they were in life. people choose to only remember the good things, just like I was saying about myself, remembering the good memories that I had of him. But I know in the back of my mind that there were bad things about him. I can rationalize that. And I can say, don't get it mixed up. Don't start building him up to be something that he really wasn't. But a narcissist can't think that way. They can only think, how can I trick that other person over there into believing that I have been forgiven? How can I trick these people over here into believing that I've cleansed my heart and my soul and God has forgiven me? And God may very well forgive them. I don't know. But are they cleansed inside? Because you can't get inside somebody else's mind or heart to know what their true thoughts are. Evil or darkness inside of them. I don't know. I can't imagine some of the people that have been labeled narcissists. If you believe in this heaven and hell, and you believe in that, afterlife, I can't imagine encountering people like that in a place like heaven, where it's supposed to be all innocent and you're reunited with the people that you loved. A narcissist doesn't love anybody. See, I think the closest he ever came to loving anybody was his dad and his kids. Anything to his youngest child, but just very close. Very, like they had a really good relationship, spent a lot of time together. So maybe he did have some, if he had any kind of love, if there was any inkling of love inside of him, it was for that child. And the way that he talked and spoke about his dad was like, he kind of idolized him. I'm going to go into all the details. I think I may have spoken about it in my playlist. But it's like when anybody else passes away. You mourn, you think back on the good times, you try to remember the redeeming qualities about these people. And that's really hard to do with a narcissist. If it's your narcissist parent or sibling or neighbor or friend. But a love that you gave your love to, and that you believed at some point in your life, you believed that they also loved you. And you believed that you were soulmates. You told each other, you're my soulmate, you're my meant to be. And then you find out they really weren't, and they really weren't good for your soul. But you know what? He's passed away. And I would say it's time for me to move on. And that chapter of my life is no more. Unlike the grieving fiance who will continue to grieve and who will get pats on the back and hugs and told, I'm so sorry this happened, and who will go through life remembering this really fantastic, super great guy who she thought was going to, be her future. Unlike her, I know the facts about him. And unlike the widow, the ex-wife widow, because even though she's not his widow, they were not still married, but she was kind of the most recent, I guess. She has belongings, things that belong to him. She probably has paperwork and things to take care of. I don't know, as far as like maybe things that they may have left unsettled. I don't know. But she will grieve openly. She will say, we were divorced, but, we were married and he was a part of my life. And people will console her and they will say, I know how it ended badly, but I know you loved him while you were with him. And his kid's mom will say, people will say to her, I'm really sorry that happened. I hate it for your kids. I know that they must be, dealing with this and going forward throughout the life of his kids. People, milestones, marriages, births of their children, graduations from college, things of that nature. They will always have this hanging over that he wasn't there, he wasn't a part of it. So all of these people, and even his own family members, will always mention his name and have him as, a memory, good or bad. They may talk about him like a dog. There are probably a lot of people out there who worked with him and knew him and did not get along with him, and women that he wronged who probably speak ill of him. And then there's me, who was kind of always just in this state of limbo. I was kind of the in-between. And it's ironic that I say that because just a few days before all this happened, I was talking to somebody and we were talking about this movie, this book called The Lovely Bones. And if you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's a great book. They made a movie, and the movie's good too, but the movie doesn't do the book justice. But I was talking about the in-between in this book, and it's kind of like when somebody dies before their soul is at peace with what happened to them on earth, they're kind of in a state of like limbo, in between heaven, in between life, and moving on. And I always kind of felt that. I always kind of said to myself, I live in this in-between. I never got closure. I never had the life with him that he promised, or that we promised to each other, and that we talked about during our happier times together. And I never got any resolution to all of the heartbreak and the turmoil that he put me through. And somebody who's your friend would never talk to you that way or treat you that way, or kind of put you in a position where you feel bad about yourself, or you have to question and doubt, and never give you any answers, and always try to blame and shift the blame. So I started to figure it out, and then I wanted nothing to do with him. And then I learned that he had passed away, and I started thinking, well, there went that chance to ever hear, even though I know that's the whole point of this long drawn out video. I know that I was never going to hear that from him regardless. He was never going to have any epiphany, and he was never going to become an un-narcissist, He was never going to stop being a narcissist and say, wow, I can't believe I really did treat you that way. I'm really sorry for that. It wasn't you. You didn't do anything wrong. I targeted you, and I deliberately started a loving relationship with you, knowing that you were in a vulnerable state of mind in your life. And I took you in, and we had this great time together for a while. And then I started to gaslight you. I started to demean you. I started to devalue you. Started to push you away. I left you homeless. I left you embarrassed and humiliated to your family and friends and loved ones. I left you questioning everything about yourself and your self-esteem. And I dumped you, and I went straight back to my ex so that I didn't have to support my own children through the court, so that I still had control over her and that whole situation. And then as soon as I no longer had a financial obligation to her, I found some other woman who he had already found, by the way, and had already started up a relationship with. And I was just a afterthought. When he was reaching out to me during that last part of 2019, he was already with this other woman. He was already talking to her privately and setting things into place, I don't know if he just was hoping for one last chance with me for a hookup or what it was, but now he is gone. He is dead. He's in his grave. His family's mourning, I guess. At least the children probably are. And if they're not mourning him as a human being, they're probably mourning what they're having to face, this funeral expense, and going forward without his help as far as finances, and help maybe to get a car and things like that, because he always was good to his child. And so now this is a new life they're going to have to start But they all have something to take away, and I have all I have is that memory of that short period of time that I knew him, and he was a part of my life, good or bad. And I just wonder what other people felt, what they went through when they found out. I've had a few people on Reddit that I talked to that said, I was ecstatic. I was celebrating when I heard the news. Well, I never felt that way. I never felt like real sadness or like that I was grieving or mourning. But I never felt happy either. But the one thing I did kind of feel a little bit relieved about was that this woman with these young kids were not going to have to deal with that. They were never going to have to know what could have really been the ruin of their life, you know. But I do want to take a minute to thank everybody who has watched my videos, listened to my videos, and followed this story. Passed away. And just like my friend said to me, you know, I know that you are feeling some hurt, because when you love somebody, your side of that love was real. When you break up with them, you go through the real emotions. Even when you learn that every bit of it on their end was just a game and playful and fun and just something for them to target somebody and to make their life miserable and to move on. Once they were bored and once they were tired of that game, they moved on to the next person and did the exact same thing to them. But it doesn't matter, because your feelings inside of your heart were real. So you go through the same feelings as anybody else who gets broken up with, who breaks up and divorces or whatever. And I said, well, a lot of people talk about narcissists live to be very old, and then they become these old, hateful, grouchy, mean-spirited, old, crotchety people. And this person said to me, I believe that narcissists are more prone to die at a younger age. Not young like teenage, but middle age, because they're so poison inside of them, their minds, and they live dangerous lifestyles. They use drugs. They are heavy drinkers, a lot of them. They are heavy smokers. They take part in promiscuity. They sleep around with a lot of people. And maybe they live risky lifestyles. They might have very poor diets, but they just said, I believe they die younger because it's meant for them to. I don't know, because I don't know. But I just wanted to share those thoughts with everybody and just let everybody know that this has happened. And I really don't know how to end this video other than to just say, for everybody out there who has an ex-narcissist in their life, you may or may not still be in contact with them, but accept the fact that you will never get the kind of closure that you pray for or long for. Because even if they did come back around and you sat down with them and tried to have a meaningful conversation to kind of get answers from them, you're going to end up with even more questions. And then they die and they leave you with all these questions that you never got answered. And I will say this to close. I did go by the church for just a minute. No one was there except for a few people that worked for the church and the funeral process. I went inside and I saw him for one last time. And just like he was in life, he was just an empty body laying there, just like any other passed away person. But there was I only looked at him for a minute because it was just too surreal. It was too surreal. And I looked around at the flowers and things, and I thought, this was a nice outpouring from people. Maybe the people that brought these flowers and these things to the funeral were doing so for the family's sake, for the children's sake. Maybe it was people he had worked with. But I allowed myself a couple of minutes alone, and I just stood there and I said goodbye. I stood by the coffin and I took one last look at him, and I said his name, and I said, goodbye. Between us, it's overall, And so just as I will say thank you all for listening, and that is the end of my story of my relationship with a narcissist.